Thank you for downloading from the BBC. For details of our complete range of podcasts and our terms of use, go to bbcworldservice.com/podcasts.
Hello and welcome to Outlook from the BBC World Service. This is Matthew Bannister with more extraordinary personal stories from around the world. Today, the Saudi princess who's speaking out against aspects of life in the kingdom. And the Chinese man who lost both his legs in a childhood accident but went on to build a successful career as a sculptor. First, the Saudi royal family has thousands of members, but you don't expect to find one of them living in a West London suburb. Princess Basma bint Saud bin Abdul Aziz is the 115th child of the former King Saud and niece of the current king. Her mother, who came from Syria, was one of King Saud's 35 wives. Unlike most of the other royals, Princess Basma is an outspoken critic of many aspects of Saudi society, using her blog to speak out about what she sees as humanitarian abuses. She's calling for reform, but not revolution, in the country founded and named after her grandfather. When she came to the Outlook studio, I asked how being one of many wives had affected her mother's life.
It was a daily struggle to get the attention of the king and having her night.
What do you mean, having her night? She was on duty one night, or...?
No, actually, in Islam, you're allowed to have 4 wives. And for the kings, usually, or the very rich people, they can have concubines as much as they can afford. But there are conditions there. God says in the Quran, you can marry above one if you need to. What does it mean? It means if your wife is sick or crazy, or she's not able to serve you properly. So there are conditions to marry another wife. But unfortunately now it's an open court, like a heritage, taken from one generation to another.
So a tradition that people were allowed to marry more. And did your mother live with the other 35 wives? Did she have her own accommodation?
Yes, each one of them had their own accommodation, depended on her status. My mother was the founder of the protocol. She was a very bright little girl. When she went to Saudi, she was 10 years old. She stayed on until she was 13 when she married my father. But she was very cultured, coming from Syria. So she really was the key for my father, for everything that was international, the outlook for the outside world.
So she looked after foreign visitors, foreign diplomats when they came to visit the king?
Before they came, she would ask, what sort of food they like, how they would like to be addressed, and, the new protocol that governments have. We never had it in Saudi Arabia. So she was the one actually to introduce that.
So she carved out this particular role for herself.
Exactly. And she was the one who would say yes to the marriages. The marriages would actually happen in her house. Everybody from my uncles to my aunties, whoever is in power now used to be in our house at one day or another.
Right.
So she used to manage everything around there, though she was illiterate.
Really?
Yes, and she only read the Quran, the scripts. But she was a very bright young lady.
Now, you were the 115th child.
Yes, and I was an unexpected child.
Really?
Yes. She was around 43 when she was pregnant with me.
And you had to leave the kingdom very early on in your life because she was ill.
Yes, she was ill.
So where did you go, and what sort of change did that mean to her lifestyle?
She went to Beirut, where she knew a lot of people because it was just next to her country. And for me, I never knew another world, really. I just took it for granted that I'm with my mother, and I was studying at a non-school, Catholic non-school.
When did you become aware of your status as a member of the Saudi royal family?
When I came to England.
Right. What age were you then?
I was around 14.
Right, and you came here to be educated, presumably.
Yes.
And so how did the status come home to you when you arrived in England?
Actually, when I was in Lebanon, I grew up with my friends. So, I was never aware of that difference, and then nobody addressed me as though I am a princess. But then, the war broke in Lebanon in 1975. I had to leave and come here. And then I was addressed as Your Highness.
Did that come as a shock to you?
It was, actually, especially when I saw some paparazzi sitting out of the small hotel I was in, and I was, thinking, why are they there? I didn't understand what the commotion is all about.
And it was about you?
It was about me, and they were taking pictures of me, and I was, stunned, really. So this is when I started becoming aware of who I am and what I am.
And did you
real
have
life.
to start to behave differently from other girls because of the responsibility of being a member of the royal family?
Yes, and I was actually very conscious of what I should be doing and what I should not be doing at that stage.
What sort of things did you not do?
Actually, I was a very carefree person. I was in the Scouts. I was looking to be an Olympic swimmer, and I'm a horse rider, and I jump, and I was the champion of Lebanon in 1971 for high jumping. I loved sports, and I was the captain of my basketball team. So I was, really sportive at that time, and I was thinking, I would make a career out of it. And then all of a sudden, I was just faced with, no, you can't. You are a Saudi princess. And even if you were a normal princess, you would not be allowed to do such things, just carefree like that. And at that time in the 70s, it wasn't like now. It was totally a no thing.
And a lot of teenage girls at that time are thinking about boyfriends, are thinking about going out to nightclubs and parties and so on. Did you have to avoid all of that?
Oh, definitely. I was very much aware of this since I was very young. I was educated that in Islam, we don't do this. Plus, in Beirut, though it was a very open community, at the same time, I was brought up in a Catholic school. And Catholic school nuns do not actually believe at all in nightclubs or boyfriends or all this. So I had it from both sides.
What about your friends, though? Because they might have behaved in a very different way. If you're at school in Hertfordshire, in the UK.
Yes, actually, they thought I was a strange person. And I thought I was a strange person. I hated England at the beginning. I didn't want to stay here. I wanted to go back to Lebanon, where, I spent all my childhood. And then when the paparazzi actually took my pictures, and I had a threatening call from somebody saying that they would kidnap me. So I had the police come to escort me and take me back to London. And this is when King Fahd called my mother, because my pictures were all over the place, saying
and what was the story?
The first Saudi princess to take her O-levels and A-levels in an English school. And my mother was frantic, actually. She thought, they would take me back to Saudi immediately. But what astonished me is that King Fahd actually sent a letter saying he congratulated me of being out there in a very respectable way. And then they sent me off to Oxford, where I was not registered as a princess.
Right. So your identity was kept secret in that school.
Exactly.
Right. How did you end up going back to Saudi Arabia to live as a young woman?
I was asked to go back to Saudi Arabia to settle down because they thought I spent too much time outside. My first visit was in 1980.
And what impact did it make on you as somebody who lived for so long in the West?
Actually, I was horrified. I was terrified to go back, really. But, I met my uncles, and they were very nice to me. They made me feel good, especially King Fahd. He made me feel very much at home. He told me, now you've seen everybody and everything. You can go back and continue your studies, but you have to come every year so you get always in touch with the royal family and your country. And I left, and I never went back.
And did you begin to understand things about the sort of complexity of the royal family? I mean, because the royal family is quite a large body of people in Saudi Arabia, and there's an inner circle and then an outer circle, really, isn't there?
Oh, there's a lot of circles.
All right, then tell me about how that works. And which circle are you in, by the way?
What do you tell me? I have no idea. At that time, you had the upper royal family, which is made of my uncles, the king, the crown prince, all my uncles in the ministries, interior, education. I mean, you knew who they are. And then you had my cousins, who were also, some of them, in power. You knew who was in power and who was not.
I wondered if you began, though, to sort of look at how women are treated in Saudi society and compare that to the way in which women are treated, say, in the UK.
It was fascinating, really. At that time, when I was there, women didn't venture out a lot, except at night. So it was actually, like landing on another planet.
It must have been incredibly confusing for you, because here you are, part of the establishment.
And I'm a daughter of a king.
Exactly. But your whole education, your whole outlook has been shaped outside the country.
Yes.
You must have had a time of confusion and turmoil in your mind, didn't you?
Definitely. And definitely something that I will always remember, this struggle, to come to terms to what I should be and what I am.
You eventually went back to Saudi to get married, I think. Can you tell me about that?
Yes. I was asked to go back and settle down to be able to understand and communicate with the royal family much more. And this is when I got married through a matchmaker. I didn't have a clue about the culture. I didn't have a clue about what is being a good Muslim is. Because when I went back, it was a completely different picture. So I thought, marriage would be my best solution to belong.
And did it turn out to be that?
No. My brothers were far away. So I never really had that man figure in my life. So I thought maybe, that would be it. And unfortunately, it wasn't.
You've more recently spoken out about some aspects of Saudi society that you don't agree with. What prompted you to do that? Why did you feel that you wanted to have your voice heard, yes, in that way?
Maybe out of frustration. Since I was brought up to speak out, when I started writing 6 years ago, I was encouraged to continue by society and by the king, because they thought I was saying something different and I was looking at things in a different way and exposing it in a different way. I wasn't, that critical person that was actually meaning to go and criticize the government because I want a position there. I was just criticizing actually the way things were going on because I wanted things to change for the best, for the humanitarian side of society, really.
Can you give me some examples of the things that made you most upset and that you wanted to speak out about?
Actually, the one of them is the religious education that we get in Saudi Arabia. I started having to correct lots of things in my home when my children came from school. They were taught in the primary school things which should not a child be aware of at that age.
What sort of things?
Like the marriage rights. What would they understand about marriage and what they should be doing with their husbands and what's okay and what's not? Like wearing perfume, that you will do adultery if you go with perfume down the street.
And you've also spoken out about the guardianship system in Saudi Arabia, which means that women really need a male relative or husband or a brother or a father or somebody to act on their behalf. I mean, even literally to go out of the house, you need a man. To drive you anywhere, you need a man, whether it's a driver from India or Sri Lanka or Afghanistan, who comes from a completely different society, would go in with a woman who he doesn't know and she doesn't know, and he would drive in a crazy way and take her wherever, and even though men know that in Saudi Arabia, they allow her to go with a driver rather than let her drive her own car and be safe, because they think if they would give her the initiative of driving, she would be leading. And this is something they don't want to do. They don't want to give her the freedom of even thinking of leading something. Well, now, when you raise these points, what sort of reaction do you get from your uncle? What sort of reaction do you get from other members of the royal family?
Believe it or not, I think personally, my uncle is one of the most advanced men in Saudi Arabia. He is a very true Bedouin, and true Bedouins give women the lead.
But he's a very powerful person. Why can't he change some of these things about society?
I think he just lost a lot of ground with the day-to-day life. He's been too much occupied with the foreign politics that other people have taken advantage of that.
So are you saying that the king, in a way, doesn't have as much power as I thought he had, and that there are those around him who exercise more power, and that they're the people responsible for some of the things you disagree with in Saudi society?
Actually, I wouldn't, put it as blunt as this. I would always tell you that, like any monarchy, you have the layers. And these layers are the ones who are responsible about executing the orders. They do it the way they want to, not the way the upper circle or the upper government wants to.
Has there been any kind of backlash against you for speaking out in the way that you have?
Yes, definitely, and I still do. Some of my uncles been very supportive and others been not at all supportive. I've had some threats.
What kind of threats? You mean death threats? Or?
No, usually people who speak out in our country, either they're not allowed to leave the country, or they're brought back. You can see so many princes and princesses being, brought back for declaring something or another.
Are you worried that might happen to you?
Tell you the truth, I'm not worried because I'm now too much of a popular person.
You live in West London.
Yes.
Do you feel more at home now in West London than you would do in Jeddah, do you think?
Let me say I feel more comfortable. I've been all around the world. I've been to Washington, New York, everywhere, France. But I feel that the English have maintained their identity. And I think this is your strength around here, that you put humanity first. Well, everywhere I went, they put power and money first.
Including in Saudi Arabia?
Including Saudi Arabia. I think Saudi Arabia has been influenced a lot by the American culture. Power and money and fame, glitz, the Hollywood life. We live it.
Princess Basma bin Saud bin Abdul Aziz. And you can see photos of us together in the Outlook studio on our Facebook page. Just search for Outlook BBC World Service. Now, when Weng Hui was a young boy, he had a terrible accident which meant he lost both his legs. Growing up in the Ningxia region in the north of China in the 1970s, prospects for such a badly injured child were grim. But his parents persevered in the battle to make his life better. Overcoming his disability, Weng Hui managed to complete his schooling and went on to become a sculptor. Now aged 39, he owns 3 very successful shops, is expanding into the international market, and also runs a training centre for other people with disabilities, teaching them to sculpt too. When I spoke to him from Incheon, Weng Hui told me about the day of the accident.
肯定的嘛，因为我是4岁半的时候，是去我母亲的单位，就那个化工厂，就是他做化工产品的一个厂，就是做。
When I was 4.5 years old, I went with my mother to the chemical plant where she worked. She didn't let me go with her at first, but I insisted. There was a machine on the upper floor mixing detergents, and I was curious. I stepped into the machine and got stuck. At the beginning, 1 leg was stuck, but I struggled, and then 2 legs were stuck. The switch for the machine was downstairs, and by the time it was turned off, my legs had been smashed. My parents rushed me to the hospital. Some relatives and friends suggested that they abandon me to avoid me being a burden for the family and to keep me from suffering. However, my parents insisted on saving my life.
How long were you in hospital for?
医院里住了大概有3个多月，因为是这样。
I stayed in the hospital for 3 months. In fact, my legs were not totally damaged in the accident, but the medical services weren't good at that time. I got an infection, and eventually my legs were removed completely.
What was going through your mind during that time in hospital? Were you frightened? Were you angry? Were you sad?
当时因为年龄小，反正是觉得是。
I was quite young and really felt the physical pain. I remember being worried about my future. I could see from my parents' and relatives' eyes, and from what they said, that they were worried too. I was almost classified as useless.
So what was the reaction of other people to your disability? What did your school friends say, for example?
家里为我配了假肢，然后到了上学的年龄，然后送我去上学。那阵。
After getting out of hospital, I had artificial legs fitted. When I was nearly 7 years old, my parents sent me to school. The children were young and curious. They looked at me strangely because I had no legs, like they were looking at an alien or something abnormal. I felt pressurized, like I was an alien. I didn't like talking to people.
Did you have to use a wheelchair to get about?
那阵我们那儿那阵还没有那么先进，轮椅。
I didn't have a wheelchair, but my parents made me one. The school wasn't too far away, and my father or brother took me there every day. I also managed to use my artificial legs and crutches to walk.
特别困难，因为那个必须得扶着东西。
It was very difficult. When I started secondary school, I couldn't use artificial legs anymore. They were too heavy. Later, I gave up using them altogether and started using a stool to walk with, putting it in front of me and pulling myself along like that. I still use the stool. I can use it to play ping pong and go fishing.
Were there times when you wanted to give up on your education?
想过呀，当时因为一是行动的不便利。
Yes, I did have that thought. At the time, it wasn't easy for me to move around. Some children were trying to help me, but others bullied me. More importantly, I just felt different. During breaks, children would go outside to play, but I had to stay inside. I couldn't drink too much water because the toilet wasn't close to the classroom. After starting secondary school, I felt lonely and sorry for myself. It was all terribly unfair. I was really very depressed.
What was it that drew you to making sculpture?
刚开始是这样，刚开始是我是随父亲学了5年中西医。
At the beginning, I learnt medicine from my father for 5 years. At the time, disabled people were not allowed to go to university. Without a degree, you can't get a doctor's license, so I gave up trying.
And then took up sculpture? Was that the next thing?
对，因为那个当时是为了就说是以后的一个。
Yes, that was for my future. My family were thinking what was suitable for me, and I liked drawing, and when I was young, one day my brother took me to a home made of Halland stone. That's a famous kind of stone mined locally. Then I went to a crafts factory as an apprentice.
And did you feel that you really enjoyed sculpture right from the beginning, that it was a natural thing for you to do?
喜欢也占一。
I do like it, but really I needed a skill. I can't depend on my parents forever.
You opened your first shop in the 1990s. That must have been a big moment for you.
也很艰辛。那阵因为。
Yes, but it was hard as well. The studio in my factory was on the 3rd floor, and I had to use 2 stools to get upstairs. I learnt carving there for 2 years.
And about the same time, I believe you met and married your wife. How did you meet her?
那是我自己就说是有一个自己开了一个很小的，就是学艺后。
I opened up a little shop at the time. My wife's sister really liked the crafts, and they would come in together. Then, my wife used to come on her own and help me tidy up. That's how we met.
And romance blossomed, presumably. Did she have any reservations about getting married to somebody with your disabilities?
当时她的家庭是反对的。后来我很感激她，也就是。
Her family didn't agree with our marriage, but she insisted. I was very grateful. My wife now tells other people that in her eyes I'm not disabled at all because I've done what other people could not achieve. She feels really proud of me and says I'm the perfect man.
Your business has grown. I think you have 3 shops, and now you're beginning to sell your sculptures on the international market. Has it been a struggle to grow your business?
困难是也有，就是因为我现在不光是以生意为。
There have been difficulties. I'm not only doing business, but I have a training centre, and now, with the help of some other organisations, we provide free training for the disabled. I think sculpture is really suitable for people who can't move around so easily.
It's obvious that you've had many struggles in your life, a lot of things to overcome. What has given you the strength and the courage to keep going and to make a success of your life?
还是信念，保持一个好的心态，就说是不要老怨这个命运的不公，就说是。
I believe you shouldn't complain that life is unfair to you. When you experience difficulties, don't be afraid of failure. If you fall over, stand up again. Believe you'll win. Be optimistic. That's how I always encourage my students.
Wong Hui. I'll be back at the same time tomorrow with another edition of Outlook.
There are dozens of different podcasts now available from the BBC, including news, documentaries, science, business, arts and sport. For details of them all, go to bbcworldservice.com/podcasts.